So I'm here talking about the upcoming eclipse, the lunar eclipse that's happening on January 10th. It's happening in Gemini in the nakshatra of Punarvasu. Now, of course, the last big eclipse happened on Christmas Day, December 25th. We had a solar eclipse in Mula nakshatra in Sagittarius. Of course, that was a big event that I talked about. In fact, in my 2019 forecast, I talked about what a huge transformative cycle that was going to start. And here we are in the middle, in between, in this amazing transformative eclipse cycle. Look at what's happened here in the world. We can look around us and see this these huge shifts that are happening geopolitically. We see these crazy fires in Australia, like the world is burning, and it's pretty scary and dangerous. And we're really seeing the truth of what we're doing to our planet, to our culture and our society. Our leaders, and all kinds of things. Like I've been saying, of course, this is an extension of the Jupiter, and the intense Jupiter energy with all these planets in Sagittarius. We had that eclipse, that solar eclipse over here in Sagittarius. Now we see all these planets have moved into Purva Ashada. Purva Ashada is about devotion. It's ruled by the god Apas, and that's related to water and the ocean and bhakti and devotion. So for your spiritual practices, very devotional. And again, as the world gets crazier and we seem to have less control, the more we need to feel this sense of devotion to something higher, and to really connect with our practices and our teachers and those teachings. So you can see all these planets here in Purva Ashada as we get closer to the eclipse. I'll go back and show you. I'm recording this now. It's January, like early January 6th on the West Coast, like Aries, Taurus, the moon is here. And Mars is in Scorpio now. Again, Mars is definitely about discipline, spiritual power, also perhaps, anger, frustration, warfare, fighting for what we think is right. As soon as Mars went into Scorpio on Christmas Day, as that eclipse was happening, we started to feel and see more, potential frustrations and fighting the good fight, or the battle lines being drawn around the earth. Fire, all these fires, and these are probably the two main stories that I've seen, particularly with the escalation of tensions now in the Middle East with the President of the United States. It's this major assassination. Assassinations have a lot to do with Mula nakshatra, which took place a few days ago, January 2nd or 3rd. We still had these planets in Mula nakshatra. And again, Mula literally has to do with things like murder and death and perhaps assassinations. And again, this uprooting and pulling things out by the roots to start over, so that now we have the opportunity to plant new seeds. Let's hope they're seeds of devotion. Let's hope that after seeing the truth revealed and the truth exposed, that we come together around greater, again, devotion, love, connection, compassion for each other. And for the world in general. And, the governments and all the structures that we're hoping, that are going to, bring us, peace and redemption are if not failing, they're definitely potentially complicated. But there's definitely the possibility with Purva Ashada to water and nurture those seeds of beauty and devotion. Now, again, one of the things that happens, as I always say, with Purva Ashada, is it also shows where we're devoted to what we believe. And we can see this now that things become dogmatic. This is in many ways the very dogmatic section of Sagittarius. It's the quality of Sagittarius that is dogmatic. Dogmatic means now we have a figure to worship. We're often devoted to figures like political figures, maybe religious figures, spiritual figures, and teachings. We need to be devoted to something that is worth being devoted to. Instead, we're often devoted to things of the world, just like everything in the world, devoted to this political figure, this political ideology, this religion. So again, rather than it being spiritual, it's religious. This is the lower vibration. Rather than it being a great guru or a great teacher or a great leader, it's this figure that's mixed with all kind of corruption, and they're just as virtuous as they are destructive. And because they're all mixed up in politics of the world and gain and loss, and this is the world. The world is always a mixture of this complexity, and we wind up getting snatched up in it, in the confusion of those things. So we can really see this now in the world as, again, we can certainly see it in the political situations of the world. Of course, all of a sudden now the whole world is holding their breath because of this political assassination. We now are afraid that the Middle East is going to get set on fire, literally with bombs exploding. And we see these massive protests and people holding up pictures of these religious, of these political figures, like in Iran, of the great of their military leader that was just assassinated, and then burning the flag of the US, and horrible, scary images now of fanaticism. Again, this is also devotion. Fanaticism is devotion. Spiritual, when you become devoted to a guru or a teaching or a teacher, you're kind of fanatical about it. It's the same energy. Those of you who've listened to me for, or as long as you've listened, you've heard me talk about this quality of Sagittarius, where it's dogmatic. And again, this is how you see the sidereal zodiac play out very clearly. First section is Mula, which is pulling out by the roots. It can often be something that creates this hole in our life that we need to then fill with whatever we're devoted to. What are you devoted to? Some political solution, some religious solution, some spiritual solution. They're not the same thing. Religion is different than spirituality. Spirituality are about practices. So again, especially now with Mars and Scorpio as well, during this time, it's a great time to really do your practices and be disciplined. And you see people are disciplined toward whatever it is they're willing to fight for. Gathering in mass, first of all, assassinating a leader of a country, and the other very reckless things the president of the United States is saying. If you want to say at least he's disciplined about, he's not disciplined, but fighting, this fighting spirit that is, in the opinion of many or most, going to lead to a potential catastrophic ending. I don't think there's any history of the world where assassinating people and getting people screaming death to your country or whatever ever ends up well. And again, we don't learn from history. There are people who are like, oh yeah, this is great, even in the United States, which is a real tragedy. I'm not going to make this political, but we can see people ready to fight and maybe even die for what they think is right in some fired up religious, devotion to something, being very devoted to that. Be careful what you're devoted to right now. And whatever it is that you're devoted to, you can have the discipline to bring it about and make it a fixture in your life. Now, this let me just move this forward. And again, as we go forward, we're now going to have a full moon. It's going to be in Gemini, and it's in it's in Punarvasu nakshatra. Punarvasu literally means return of light, and it comes after Ardra. Now, we had the solar eclipse in the summer. It was in Ardra nakshatra, and Ardra is ruled by Lord Shiva or Lord Rudra, and this is a way you can track these eclipses. This one was in Ardra. The one in the summer was the solar eclipse, was in Ardra, and now this one is in Punarvasu nakshatra. And again, Ardra solar eclipse, now it's a lunar eclipse, which happens about 6 months later, that kind of closes the cycle in some ways. And that Ardra solar eclipse over the summer was just, again, things like blowing up, and there were also wildfires and a lot of tensions. I could go back and look at the dates. People could maybe supply and furnish some dates. There were probably some events, especially I would bet related to Iran, around that solar eclipse this summer. This lunar eclipse is now in the next nakshatra, Punarvasu. Again, it means return of the light, which is also ruled by the god Aditi, who is the mother of the Adityas, the solar deities that lead to a prosperous and happy life. And those Adityas are also very important now in our life, and in living a happy life, living a life of peace and truth. I have this, you've probably seen the web class that I have. If you haven't seen it yet, you should register for it. It's where you can also see and get a free 2020 forecast. I will also talk about Saturn and Capricorn for your sign for the next couple of years. It's totally free. You can get that, and I talk about these 10 important shifts, including the eclipses of the upcoming year. But one of the big shifts that's also coming, you can see this first one, Saturn enters Capricorn, where it'll be for the next couple of years. We're right on the verge of that. So the next the next new moon is going to happen with Saturn in Capricorn, not in Sagittarius, where he's been since early 2017. But this eclipse, now the solar eclipse in Gemini and in Punarvasu provides contrast to all these planets here in Sagittarius, where we just had the solar eclipse, because as you see, Sun and Ketu are very close. We had the Sun-Ketu solar eclipse in Sagittarius on Christmas. This is also the harmonizing eclipse after that. So we have the new moon solar eclipse, which was in Mula on Christmas Day, which again pulled out by the roots, uprooting this potential dark ideology. I said we're going to see the truth of things. And I will tell you, it's really brought into truth a lot of things here in the U.S. again, one good exercise is to try to use your discrimination instead of use your judgment in the sense of judging what you think is right or wrong. I have to do this all the time, like, because, I definitely have my views about what I think is right and wrong, like the truth of what's happening in a literal sense. Like, for example, how, let's say, the president is acting and what's right and wrong and what's really going on and what's not. But there's a deeper truth beyond that. And that's how the larger situation plays out, because the truth is also that even something like misconduct and lying gets rewarded. That's also a truth. There's also a deeper truth that the biggest problem is the systems themselves, and just observing how the greater truths are playing out right now. For example, I think it's pretty clear that this assassination that happened of the Iran military leader was certainly a little bit fueled by the fact that the president has been impeached, and it's a distraction. And it's fascinating to watch, even just, again, and it's just a truth that hardly no one on the news is talking about it, barely talking about it, very afraid to say something about it. It's also just a disgusting truth that something like this can happen, and we're not shocked. And immediately the whole media complex collapses around, okay, just how everything is discussed and described and framed. Particularly, I say this now because all this energy in Gemini. You'll hear people say things like, especially in U.S. media, well, he was a terrorist. Well, he was a terrorist. He was a terrible guy. Killed all these Americans. He was terrible. He was terrible. I'm talking about the Iranian military general. Killed all these Americans. Okay, what's all these Americans doing there in the first place? What are all these Americans doing in Iraq? Again, they call us terrorists. How can you say we don't look like terrorists to them? We just assassinated one of their citizens. We had just assassinated one of their officials. Who's the terrorist? But but again, if you were to say this on TV, it'd be like, oh my God, really? I saw there was an interview on one of the Sunday talk shows where the U.S. candidate Elizabeth Warren just suggested that we need to look at the fact that this might be a distraction, that the president might be using this as a distraction. And the announcer was like, are you saying that President Trump would be doing this as a distraction? Are you actually saying that? Like, hello? So again, all of these are deeper truths that we all have to be looking at. And there is definitely there are so many layers of truth and judgment and perhaps triggered responses that are happening now. People getting fired up and righteous about their cause, their own individual cause. On a personal level, and it's not, I did a post, I did a social media post last week that had a big butt, someone, and hardly anyone got offended by it. Most people thought it was pretty funny. And I think it was funny. And I think we have to laugh at things, but there's a couple people that got really fired up and offended about the image that I did last week on YouTube, where I used an image of I guess it was a woman with a gigantic butt sitting on a very small stool and a dog sitting under it. It was humorous. And again, just relative to how much flack I can get sometimes, relative to how much, blowback I can get, it was hardly any. It was like 99% favorable. But there were definitely a couple people that had to just get fired up about it and start this, fanatical I think it's somewhat fanatical because it's probably self-referential. It was people who themselves were overweight and felt bad about themselves, had to now accuse me of doing something to them. Again, they're not fired up like that about every cause, I'm sure. They are about that cause because, again, it's the kind of, because our feelings are hurt, now I'm a victim of you because my feelings are hurt, rather than looking at like, well, if my feelings are hurt by something like this, maybe I should look at why I feel hurt and ashamed of myself rather than blame a joke about it. Now, again, there are real things that can be over the line. Literally, for example, the term fat shaming. I'm just going to talk about it, even though a couple people might not like it. I'm not going to avoid it because most of the people saw this. But even getting into all these labels and the sort of political correctness we have in the world right now, a lot of that is driven by the kinds of energies that are very active right now, like this sort of outrage culture where we conflate things and just get fired up in our own, and it's very selective. We're always enraged and outraged about our own personal thing. Like someone's outraged about that, maybe they're not outraged about cultural appropriation or black people or this or that. No, it's their thing. So it's this mixture of narcissism, because it's very narcissistic usually, and the license to blow things up. And again, look at what I was saying earlier about the fanaticism and devotion and belief. And again, we have a religion now, or a belief system of like outrage culture. Political correctness is definitely an ideology in this day and age. A kind of political cycle of outrage. By the way, I'm going to say this too, and I have a way of pissing everybody off, so I'm going to just kind of do a little bit of that now. But this is one of the reasons Donald Trump got elected, whether people want to admit it or not, especially those who are constantly getting outraged and virtue signaling to everything. You can't make a joke about anything without getting people upset. Donald Trump had two messages when he was running for president. One was, this sort of drain the swamp. But one of the biggest things he did was completely politically incorrect. This was one of the reasons he has appeal. He had appeal, and he still has appeal, because he's so politically incorrect. Now, I'm not judging it good or bad. I just try to look at things objectively, not really judge them so much. And everybody knows I don't like Trump's policies or anything about him, but this was one of the reasons he's successful, to just write it off like everyone was just a racist. That's not true. People liked him because he was not politically correct. And it's mainly a thing of the left, of the liberal, where you can't say anything without getting descended upon and judged. And when that happens, the people who are doing that are the ones that are shaming others more than the ones that they're saying are doing the shaming. So anyway, this whole kind of thing of having to examine, I just unpack this a lot, because these are the kind of truths that we can look at. Instead of looking at something in such a narrow way, like this is right and this is wrong, and I saw the truth. I saw that Trump did this and this is true, and I saw that and that's true, and we have our little narrow visions of truth. That's not really what I'm talking about when I'm talking about truth. I'm talking about examining your biases, your assumptions of what you think is true, regardless of any outcome you get. Just looking at it, just looking at the way things are and the truth of what it is with no bias. It's very hard. Again, so people can hear me talk about my opinions and my views about things, of how I would like to see the world, how I wish things were, how I wish it looked this way. And that's part of how I look at things. But the other thing I do is just look at what the truth is, aside from what I want from it. And that's also a big part of what this whole cycle of Rahu going through Gemini, Ketu going through Sagittarius, and these eclipses, especially right now, is an opportunity for us to just look at it and see, how is that? What's really happening here? And this is why Mercury is the ruler of Gemini, and Mercury is very neutral. He's very, he's not fired up about righteousness, and this is right and this is wrong, and you should do it this way, and it's this and it's that, and all these big things people get fired up about. This is also why Mercury is the one with the sense of humor, who says, oh, cut it out. You need to laugh at things more. You need to lighten up. You need to lighten up. And boy, how coincidental that the ones accusing someone of fat shaming have a big ass and they're feeling secure about it. See how politically incorrect I am? No, but how coincidental is that? Look, and laugh about it. So what? And again, no one cares. We personalize things. You know, I grew up with this terrible stuttering problem. I've been teased. I've been ashamed. I've been through the whole thing too. I get it. Just to have people laugh at me all the time. And by the way, even when that was happening, it felt horrible. But I understood why they laughed, and it still hurt my feelings. It hurt my feelings because I know when I used to stutter really badly, I would make all these weird faces. I get teased about it now. There's a couple people who used to troll me online. They actually still do. And one of the ways they would troll me was to make fun of me stuttering. There was a guy, he's actually sort of disappeared now, but a couple of years ago, this guy was constantly like teasing, making fun of the way my face twitches when I stutter sometimes, or some little twitches that I make sometimes to not stutter, because you find ways around it. And there are little things that I do sometimes, little ticks, I guess you would say, when I feel that I might stutter to kind of get past a word or something. Anyway, but I don't like it, but if someone makes fun of it, I don't say, oh, you're speech shaming or whatever. It's like, anyway. So we all deal with it. You just got to deal with it. And anyway, so I guess what I'm saying here is that this is all just attachment to the ego. It's all attachment to ego. It's all ego. And nothing in this world is real, ultimately. Ultimately. And all of it is, if you can't, look, laughing at something, and laugh if you're getting so paralyzed out of fear or out of righteousness and all this, then you're stuck. You are trapped. You are trapped. And no joke that someone made is creating anything except a mirror. No joke. No, even an aggressive comment where someone aggressively comes after you personally and says your name and maybe says you have a big butt and now I'm fat shaming you personally, like people would go after me on those videos, Sam Jeppy and his stuttering and his nervous tics and vicious attacks against me. I mean, there were videos of that, people saying that. And I would just laugh. I was like, wow, this dude is like really coming after me. And by the way, a lot of it was because I liked Trump. That was the main reason. Or I'm sorry, not because I liked it, but because I said things they didn't like. It was like 99.9% because I said things about Trump. It was like the main thing. So this person would just personally attack me. Stuttering was the main thing. So it's not as if I don't know it too. But you got to laugh at it. And look, I get it. I'm sure it looks funny. So anyway, all this attachment, this is where the soul gets stuck. The soul gets stuck in the attachments. And so this full moon here, this full moon is, oops, where we get here. So this full moon here is up here in Gemini, and you see it's a full moon in Punarvasu, return of the light, this creative principle of Aditi, the mother of the Adityas, and this healing energy that allows us to. It's actually the bridge between Gemini and Cancer. So, you know, Gemini is very much about seeing things with neutrality, finding, you know, in many ways, the joy and the fun and the and the flexibility in all of these ideas. And even when there's embarrassment or shame or guilt or whatever it is, being able to see that truth without getting so attached to it, hopefully. Punarvasu is that bridge between that, which is Gemini, and Cancer, which is the next sign, because it starts in Gemini at 20 degrees and then goes to 3 degrees, 20 minutes of Cancer, where we need to take all that and bring it into the heart and bring knowledge and information that we've gathered into the heart, into our consciousness, into our awareness, because Gemini is very much about gathering information, gathering details. Again, very neutral about it, actually, just looking and observing. It's very hard to not get some opinion about something and get all fired up about your opinion. We usually mistake ideas and thoughts for opinions. Notice the difference between the two things. This is one of the biggest things that happens with me. Yeah, I have a lot of opinions, but underneath it all, I also I know that in my mind, my opinions can vary through the whole. I can have an opinion about anything as far as, I can be just as fired up about one side of an opinion as I am fired up about the opposite. And all of it exists, though, within the realm of just ideas and seeing how all opinions can make sense and trying to find why certain opinions, maybe that I don't even agree with, what is the part of it that makes sense? Like, what's the real truth behind that opinion that maybe I'm not seeing? And it's really not even hard to find. It's like, okay, I understand why they feel that way. I understand why they say that. And I want to understand it because I want to understand all of it, right? So that's the Gemini. But then how all of that kind of information, which can be very much in the head, goes into the heart and becomes something that is ingrained in your heart and in your consciousness. This is what Punarvasu Nakshatra is. And so this is a big part of what we're doing right now, looking at the madness around us and everything that's been uprooted and changed. And we're on the precipice of all of this uncertain energy that's been shaken up. Australia is on fire. The southern hemisphere is, especially Australia, and all these wildfires just getting consumed like we've never seen. Again, the tinderbox of the Middle East is about to get completely shaken up. We have in the U.S. a president who, God knows why he's doing what he's doing. It's pretty easy, some kind of self-interest, because it's the only reason he does anything. And you have a whole political apparatus in place in the United States so far that seems to just want to protect anything this seeming lunatic wants to do. Sorry to be blunt, but no one else in our country would have done what he has done. And now you just, again, have this whole apparatus there to protect all of that because their voters like him. And it's just a total corrupt system, corruption like we've never seen, and dangerous level. Now it's going global. God knows where this is going to go. No one knows. And so, again, it's a time to really question what you think. And I question what I think. Even these ideas I just said, this is how it looks to me. But I also see that there's an opportunity for things that maybe I can't see. By the way, I'll tell you this right now. I hope all of the stuff that's happening right now, that it all works out in the best. And I don't mean in the best necessarily in the way that I think might be the best. Maybe I would love to do nothing but see all of this work out and give Donald Trump all the credit in the world for seeing something that I didn't see coming. And I mean that totally sincerely, because the opposite is going to be horrifying. It could be just an absolute horrifying disaster that we're on the brink of right now. I hope to God it's not what seems to be the case, because we could have all kinds of stuff happening, especially in the Middle East right now, with proxies everywhere. And today, even Trump saying even more, that he's going to bomb cultural sites. I mean, this would mean the U.S. president's a war criminal. I mean, God knows what is happening. I'm just like, let's hope it's not that things don't happen the way it seems like they definitely could, and that something happens. But again, this nakshatra of Punarvasu, this return of the light, regardless of what's happening in the world, you're the master of your own soul's journey and consciousness and destiny. I have again, there's there are so many opportunities right now, especially for spiritual people. We have let me just put this up here. I just want to show. Oops. Yeah. So again, I did also just want to let you know that I have done these personal forecasts for 2020. I knew it was going to be very transformative, and I put the link here. You can get a forecast for your sign that goes over all of these shifts, but I'll talk about them for your sign. And again, one of the biggest shifts is this Saturn moving into Capricorn, and your sign and what they commit to for the next 2 years because of Saturn going into Capricorn be very important. But you can, all of those 10 different shifts, you can see that for your sign, or you can get all 12 signs as well. Go look here. Let me go up here. I'll put this up. This is where you can get the forecast for your sign, my 2020 Vedic report, and then the free web class is at 2020vedicastrology.com. You can get those if you're interested. And so, yeah, just a few things here. I'll bring up a few of these comments. Lou said, I recall Trump saying Obama would start a war to get voted in. Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's so much to unravel. It's so easy to see. Linda said, Trump doesn't behave like a politician, but a businessman, not judging, just see it. Yeah, but look, as a businessman, he went bankrupt 6 times. Trump really doesn't behave like a businessman. He behaves like a mob boss, because businessmen don't act like that either. They form alliances with people. He never did. Everything about Trump is threat. Look, he threatened Iraq with sanctions if they don't let us stay today. I mean, this is some of the most twisted stuff. Trump has one play, and it's threaten. That's all he does, threaten. And he's been able to threaten because he was born into power where he could threaten people. Look, the Iraqis are our allies. If Iraq asks us to leave their country, we should leave. We should leave anyway. But if they ask us to leave, we should definitely leave. And Trump said, if Iraq asks us to leave, we're going to put sanctions on them like they've never seen. For an ally that we're supposedly helping, they're our allies, for God's sake. I mean, think of your allies like they're your family. It's like saying, if you don't let me dominate you, I'm going to punish you. Like, again, the sadism, it's like sadistic. Someone who enjoys hurting people and punishing. That's the only thing he ever does. And even with like these dictators, like if you're a cruel, sadistic leader, he loves you. Oh, Putin, great. Erdogan, yay. Somebody else oppressing their people. Yeah, my kind of guy. I'm sorry, but it's true. These leaders that care for their country and they're kind people, he's weak, he's this, he's weak. Anything that's gentle and kind. No, it's always some sadistic, punishing, attack you. Kim Jong-un, we fell in love. This is the most sadistic person I've ever seen. Again, this is very dangerous. And businesses don't thrive that way. Even all his business agreements, business relationships. He doesn't have alliances. It's all about, look, he tried to extort the guy from Ukraine, president of Ukraine. It's all about shakedowns and do this for me because I got leverage over you and cruelty. Again, you just observe it. And it gets rewarded in this world. So It's very, very obvious. And again, you can look at the difference between that and Obama. It's just objectively, look, you might like Trump's policies better. Maybe you think it's better that being strong like that and a badass is a better thing to do. Okay, I'm not debating that. But you can also just observe people. You just listen to the way Obama talks. So the way Trump talks. Trump gets up and says, these rapists. I mean, when have you ever heard anyone in public life talk like that? Again, you might think it's great for a president to do that. Okay. But again, you can just observe someone like Obama. Yeah, it's ever hope and bring people together. The Iran nuclear deal, the whole world was for it. But we have this terrible system in the United States where one person can undermine damn near everything. One person. We need to change the laws of this country and the Constitution so that treaties and these things are not where one person can come in and undo all of it. Take us out of climate agreements, take us out of nuclear deals, take us out of these unilateral agreements just because of their fragile ego, just to be cruel. Again, it's with no mindfulness. So again, you can just you can just observe that. So Amy said, has anyone seen the transits first week of February? Yeah. Mars, K2, and Mula, Jupiter, Rahu, and Gemini, Ardra. Yep. Very, very disturbing. I'm going to be talking about those, Amy, for sure, coming up. Absolutely. And it's exactly like 9/11. It's very dangerous stuff that's coming up. And so, again, we still live in this world. The other thing, though, that is happening is that, one thing about Rahu and Ketu is they exist along this axis, this Kundalini axis. And this section of the zodiac is where energy is changing and transforming. We see things like 9/11 because they exist on this axis, on this galactic plane. That's the plane of the galaxy, runs through there. So the deities of, especially Ardra Mula, these deities of Kali and Shiva are very active at this section of the zodiac. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about this and say that it's definitely this eclipse time. We're seeing these shifts and changes happening now. And it's a huge time for these shifts. I do want to show this though as well, because it was just asked, and I did make the I did talk about this in one of my newsletters, but many of you aren't on the newsletters. But Sebastian asked, how do you approach aspects to the nodes? I've seen you use them. Most of the important aspects that I use are one-way aspects of the outer planets. And right now, in fact, the biggest reason why we're seeing so much change and transformation, especially, is this Mars one-way aspect onto Rahu, this 8th house aspect. This 8th house aspect of Mars is a very transformative and potentially stressful and difficult aspect. It's the 8th house aspect of Mars. That's all you need to know. Quite destructive. And if you go back to when, I think the assassination or something happened on the 2nd or the 3rd, I don't remember the exact day. I think it was here. But Mars one-way aspect onto Rahu, this is big. And you can see in the next, like, as we get near this eclipse, look, it's even closer. It's only about 4 degrees, because this would be about 10 degrees of Gemini. As you see this, this is it's a very tight aspect here, especially around the middle of January. And then what Amy was talking about, this Mars Ketu happening here around here. Mars, Ketu, Jupiter, opposite Rahu. Especially if we get near, once we get near this, these times here, we could see, this middle of February, this is a time when we could really see some extremely damaging and difficult things happen. Mars, Ketu, Moon in Mula. So this is coming, but right now, a few things to just understand is that we are now still in this eclipse portal right now, and you don't want to get so completely lost in the world that you lose your way. And again, a lot of what I'm talking about, a lot of the things that we're challenged to stay grounded in and connected to are things that are driving your personal life, because people are still living their personal lives, and the outrage culture, all the projections, all of the polarizing. We're seeing it coming out even more now, especially around politics, all this fanaticism, right and wrong, good and bad. Breathe and look at the bigger picture, because it's giving us the opportunity to just see how maddening and polarized everything is. There's been a couple comments here about you just don't like Trump and blah, blah. I'm not going to get into all that stuff. I've said it too many times. I don't feel like saying it again. But, we need to be able to see the bigger picture and see into something larger than just this figure, that figure, this outcome, that outcome. All of these situations, all of these international entanglements are extremely, extremely dense. And people trying to put in these ideas, well, Trump is this way and he's that way. Look, he serves one thing, and that's his own interest. Again, I'll examine that belief, but let me see some. It's not the only thing, but it's pretty much almost everything gets filtered through that self-interest. To think that he did this because it was better for the country, I'm not seeing any evidence. I have no idea how anyone could rationalize that assassinating the military leader of Iran was the best thing for the United States, the safest thing for the world, the safest thing. If that was his analysis, boy, that's a pretty bad analysis. And of course, now that he's done it, all of his minions have to go out there and say it. Mike Pompeo completely embarrassing himself on the news shows today, out there trying to make this make sense, watching the newscasters fumble all over themselves, trying to not say that is the stupidest explanation I've ever heard. How can you say Americans are safer now when you're telling them all to leave Iraq because of how dangerous it is? How can you say that? And then just listen to the doublespeak come again, the total gaslighting, and then they just let it go. Again, these announcers, and it becomes normalized. Oh, okay. Again, this what looks to me like just insanity that we would have never thought would have been normal and rational before is now just the way it is. It's all self-interest, corruption, money, entanglements. Anyway, so just looking at all of that and seeing that somehow that's going to work itself out, hopefully by us all collectively and globally looking at the deeper levers of power as we navigate all these old world ways of seeing things and doing things. But underneath it all, we're spiritual beings, and spiritual practices, and especially focusing on those things now, are really powerful. This Rahu Ketu is right on this, right in this nodal, right in this plane of the galaxy, this galactic plane. They're getting very close to this 6 degrees of Gemini and Sagittarius. That's the galactic plane. So as Ketu gets into Mula, and then Jupiter Ketu are in Mula, then Jupiter Ketu Mars in Mula. Again, we're going to see things blowing apart, but we're also going to see the other thing that blows apart is your fantasies about who you think you are and what's really going on. Your spiritual practices are really, really potent now. And if you're doing them, you're feeling it. And if you're not doing them, you're just suffering more and more because you're like, I thought the world was this. So I'll just leave it at that. And Smak Aga says, Allah bless us. Amen. My heart goes out to the people of Iraq and Iran. I'll say this last thing. That the people of the United States, again, I'm just going to flat out say it. I think that they made the worst decision ever by electing this president. 3 years ago, we had a deal in place with Iran that was a way to bring it was the benefit of the Iranian people. At least it seems like to me. There might be things I haven't seen, but the whole world was allied with trying to bring Iran more into a democratic kind of way of seeing things without so much of the theocracy and the Sunni, crescent and the hardliners that have been hurting the Iranian people for a long time, at least as it seems. That Iran nuclear deal returned their money to them, loosened up sanctions. It was sanctioned by every country in the world. And then we have this guy comes in, the president, rips up these deals, antagonizes the people of Iraq, more crippling sanctions on their economy, trying to bring them into some kind of fantasy of regime change. God knows what would look like after that. This is completely the fault of the president of the United States. And it'll be seen that way historically one day. And to me, it's just tragic. And I'm very sorry. It's very depressing. And I also know that, again, these are ambiguous figures. The leader that was assassinated, all military people have blood on their hands. So again, they're all ambiguous figures. So anyone who is saying that it's black or white about Iraqi's general, I have no sympathy or love or anything for these individuals. It's not, none of it is black or white, even for Trump, even with Trump. My thing isn't personal, it's professional. He doesn't know what he's doing, and he's not doing anything in the best interest of the people. It's his own personal interest. He doesn't belong where he is. All of them are ambiguous. The military leader, Suleiman, again, it's all ambiguous. I know he brought the Iranian Guard. We're great at defeating ISIS. He's also brought untold casualties for more moderate Muslims. I understand. I don't need a lecture on it. Of course, I'm not perfect on it, but it's all ambiguous. And by the way, in the first place, what the hell are we doing there? Calling the man a terrorist because he killed Americans is the most ridiculous thing in the world, though. And again, this is what the U.S. media is doing already. Oh, but he was a terrorist. He was a terrorist. He killed all these Americans. What, is he in California killing Americans? No. What in the hell are we doing in Iraq and the Middle East? And again, so this whole ridiculous propaganda that snaps into place as soon as we start bombing people, then the media propaganda machine just clicks into place here. Anyway, it's all a mixture. So I'll leave it at that. And, I hope that you know, we all pray, and these qualities of Purva Ashara, again, it's very much about devotion, prayer, true devotion, devotion to the truth, devotion to the real thing, not devotion to a military leader that was assassinated, not devotion to a president, not devotion to a flag, not devotion to any of that crap. It's all ephemeral and changing. Devotion to the truth, which is beyond all of that. And hopefully we can navigate, at least globally and culturally and physically and personally, these very transformative times. But however it shakes out, you still are here. You're here and now with breath and body, and that moment is yours, always. That moment is yours, regardless of your circumstances. And that's where the devotion really can be correct and can be the most powerful thing right now, because all this energy in Sagittarius and Gemini and these eclipses are times when all this stuff gets concentrated. Because the same energy that's concentrating and blowing up and destroying things, the paradigm about the way we thought it was externally, it's the same energy that's ready to destroy it internally. This is why I'm saying it like that. So your spiritual practices have enormous power now. So keep that in mind as well. And again, just one last time, I'll say it and show how, or I'll just put this on the screen, where you can get the, where you can get the forecasts. You can get your own personal forecast at the 2020 at this website here, if you click there. And then if you want to also get the free 2020 webinar where I go over the 10 important shifts, you can get that as well. So have a blessed first part of January as well. I have some more. I've been doing quite a bit of writing lately, ready to start coming out with some more stuff. So anyway, you all take care and have a great full moon week.